During the mid to late 19th century, social activist movements were largely in reaction towards an exclusive, stratified socio-political hierarchy that emerged from the Industrial Revolution. These reactions consisted of abolitionism's shifting political strategies, the criticism of property law in relation to gender, and the criticism of the institution of Christianity. The reactionist elements of social activism can be seen firstly in the strategy of the abolition movement. The influence of abolitionism on the early women's suffrage movement can be seen in the social development of the various tactics used by abolitionists to convince white American voters the necessity of ending slavery. The concept of moral suasion, an initial tactic used by members of various anti-slavery organizations, was an effort to align the moral standards of the enfranchised class towards the abolition of slavery. This tactic was ultimately ineffective because it could not approach the legalism and racism of the landowning elite and that of its supporters. Abolitionists such as Frederick Douglass later expressed their displeasure of moral suasion through the application of immediate abolitionism regarding both natural rights and common law. Douglass's legalist perspective was especially applicable to the censorship behind anti-slavery gag orders by Jacksonian-era Democrats, which was revealed to the greater public by abolitionists as a gross violation of the constitutional right to petition. The right to petition, both for white women and men, was especially important as an extension of the First Amendment, but became a pragmatic pursuit by abolitionists who sought to intertwine both the struggle of protest and the struggle against slavery in one single approachable social issue. The intertwining of these issues greatly increased the favor of abolitionism among the public as a reaction against the actions of the political elite, and dramatically increased the influence of immediate abolitionism among the greater abolition movement. Another element of reaction against the social hierarchy of the United States is seen in the wording of the Declaration of Sentiments, which conveys criticisms of both the state and the social relationship between men and women. Men are regarded as having overreached their social and domestic influence, civilly enslaving the right of enfranchisement from the woman and the woman's own self. The intersectionality between the abolition movement and the women's rights movement showcases similar issues. The symbolic gesture by which men violate the natural rights of women is the same social understanding through which property rights are enshrined. The inability to own oneself or to not have the civil means to do so is the primary criticism of both abolitionism and the women's rights movements. The use of the word master regarding men in the Declaration of Sentiments suggests this coalition of ideals. The coalition between abolitionism and the women's rights movement shows the idea of owning oneself politically as the legal extension of owning property. Elisha Hurlbut's essay on the criticism of the New York State Legislature's refusal to grant women the necessary ability to own property suggests a wider criticism of the United States' inegalitarian social hierarchy. Hurlbut's reaction to the overarching influence of men on the property rights of the United States implicates a desire on the behalf of the social and political elite to civilly limit the rights of women in order to confer greater influence and wealth upon themselves. This limitation is likened to a civil death for women, where the proponents of the social and political class of the elite utilize law in order to maintain the organization of the status quo. Hurlbut's ultimate conclusion would suggest that the enfranchisement of women are a direct threat to men of the bourgeoisie, because the ownership of property provides financial independence that would compete with the independence of men. The resolutions discussed in the Declaration of Sentiments resolve these issues, which react against the oppressive elements of the contemporary hierarchy by discussing the interjection of the identity of women and their protest to the conditions of the state. Criticism of the institution of the church as a member of the same hierarchical complex that violates the natural rights of women is also shown as a reaction. The analysis of pre-Christian societies by suffragists such as Alice Fletcher and Matilda Gage offered a comparison between patriarchal Christian society and the Native American matriarchal society. Fletcher's criticisms of the exclusivity of landed property in her speech, The Legal Condition of Indian Women, show that Western societies permit a mode of social inequality, most notably within the realms of the personal rights of women regarding the ownership of property in a Christian setting. Fletcher's main thesis within her speech seeks to question the legal and political status of women in a non-Christian setting. In the Native American model, Fletcher discusses the conceptual basis of family property as an absent tradition. The lack of a formal estate in the Native American societies of the Haudenosaunee offer an alternative socio-political paradigm where the influence of a patrilineal hierarchy is absent, with the stratification of society under the role of men lying absent too. The writings of suffragist Elizabeth Cady Stanton show a similar disillusionment with Christian social teaching that affirms Fletcher's suspicions of the intersection of property law and gender roles. Stanton's The Matriarchate, or Mother Age, further elaborate on the dialectic of industrial and pre-industrial societal models, taking a deterministic position on the social decline of women corresponding with the rise of property law. Stanton's remarks on the transition of the community towards the patrilineal descent of property cultivated the essence of the family unit as it is understood in modern society. Stanton continues, noting how the ascendance of the family accompanied the individualization by property rights and privileges, and asserts its role as the basic unit of the political system, as a misattribution by proponents of the patriarch hierarchy. Stanton, instead, following the dialect established previously, sets the family as a standard by which men can reinforce their influence on the condition of civil rights and property rights. This contrasts with pre-Christian societies, where the family did not possess women to conform to a specific gender normality that greatly favored landowning men. Matilda Gage seems to also agree with the understanding of Fletcher and Stanton that the matriarch archetype greatly disfavored the consolidation of society and property under the patriarch hierarchy, as her critique over the lack of female enfranchisement in modern society implies a greater position of power women have been unjustly removed from. For Gage, the reasoning of the patriarchy denies the Republican ideals of democracy and disestablishes itself from the pre-industrial worldview of an egalitarian collective. Gage infers that the rejection of women in both institutions of church and state degrade the innate routine of the sexes prior to the introduction of patrilineality, which is viewed as being an injustice due to its removal of women from previously egalitarian occupations. The assertions and criticisms of the institution of the church as an element of the patriarchy are rooted in a singular reactive analysis. The analysis and criticism of patriarchal institutions show the relation of the socially pragmatic nature of early abolitionism, the dissidence of contemporary property law, and the disillusionment of Christian social teaching, all reflecting a new mode of thought that show a reaction to the oppressive conditions of the early history of modern American society.